Hey everybody, this is Mark and this is Dice Monkey, and today we're going to be doing another battle report. This is an old world battle report. This is my Bretonnians versus my Dwarves. So I have about 4,000 points worth of painted Bretonnians, probably a few more that are unpainted, and then I also have a little more than 2,000 points of painted Dwarves. My friend Justin had never played the old world before, and so he loves Dwarves, and so I told him, you can use mine. So I did a much better job this time of actually getting my overhead shots to sort of give you a better view of what's going on. I still need to work out exactly how I'm going to be able to show off those overhead shots and make sure to take those photos more consistently. I think I've got a plan in place that'll work a lot better, that'll help remind me to make sure to get those shots, but let's go ahead and dive into the battle. So this is the Battle of Dragon Falls Pass. So with my dwarves, they have a blue color scheme. They don't really have anything specifically attached to any particular mountain. So I began looking through the old world map and trying to figure out exactly where they were located at. And then I really like the color scheme of Carcassonne. So that's my Bretonnian army. So this is Dragon Falls. You can see here, it's pretty close to Carcassonne. It's up in the mountains. It's right near Carrick Bufdar. So it's a perfect spot for the Bretonnians and the Dwarves to end up finding some conflict there. So here's what I wrote for the background of our mission. I sent this out to him about a week before we were actually going to play. We're both really, really big on the narrative, so this is the story. For generations, the inhabitants of Dragon Falls have clashed with the dwarves of Carrick Bufdar. The valley where the two forces now prepare for battle has always been a contested region, rich in resources and of critical strategic importance. The Bretonnian fortress, built centuries ago, overlooks the valley and has been a coveted stronghold for both sides, its control seen as a key to dominance in the region. Recent events have escalated the simmering hostilities into open warfare. A series of aggressive border skirmishes and accusations of territorial encroachment have left both sides bristling with anger and suspicion. The humans of Dragon Falls, led by their charismatic and ambitious warlord, seek to expand their influence and secure the valuable resources of the valley. They believe that controlling the fortress provides them with a strategic advantage and also enhances their standing among the neighboring lords. On the other hand, the dwarves of Carrick Bufdar, led by their stoic and seasoned king, view the fortress as a sacred site. According to Dwarven lore, it was originally built upon the ruins of an ancient Dwarven outpost, and reclaiming it is seen as a matter of honor and ancestral duty. The dwarves have fortified their defenses and called upon their allies to aid in the coming conflict, determined to repel any incursion by the humans. Both armies have now marched into the valley, their banners fluttering in the wind and their war cries echoing through the mountains. The valley itself, with its treacherous terrain and narrow passes, presents a formidable battlefield. As the forces array themselves for battle, the tension is palpable. The stakes are high, and each side is fully aware that the outcome of this clash will determine the future balance of power in the region. In the shadow of the Bretonnian fortress, the warriors of Dragon Falls and the defenders of Carrick Bufdar ready their weapons and steel their hearts. The battle is set to be a brutal and decisive confrontation with honor, resources, and strategic supremacy hanging in the balance. As the first rays of dawn break over the mountains, the valley stands poised on the brink of war, awaiting the inevitable clash that will echo through the annals of history. So there's the background. Now, I did not get a shot of our forces arrayed before we started moving, so this is how everything looked after his first movement and my first movement. Pretty simple and straightforward, so I'm going to describe exactly what had happened in that first opening salvo. So to begin with, my Bretonnians ended up taking the knee, so we ended up surrendering and letting him take his turn first. That ended up giving me a warding save of 6+, which ended up saving me quite a few times. We ended up playing this down at our local game shop, the Gamers Haven, and you can see here, he had his dwarves sort of set off a bit to the side as we began setting up. He was noticing me spread out, so he sort of bunched up, which is a good dwarven tactic, because then that just requires me to move a lot further, and he wasn't going to be moving very fast. So right from the start, he did almost no movement. He kept most of his stuff in place because he was going to let me come to him. He decided to move up a little bit in the next couple of turns, but only to meet me head on. You can see off to the far left there. That's a unit of Slayers who's moving in towards my questing knights. In the first round, that forest there has a unit of Dwarf Rangers in it, and they ended up taking out one of my questing knights. That's why you can see that we're one short there. Right in the middle, we've got actually just to the right of that, we've got a unit of knights. They've got my bannermen with it. We'll see a much better shot of that up in just a second. And then we've got my Pegasus Knights led by my Baron on Hippogriff. Also, just above that, you can see that there is a Dwarven Gyro Bomber that he's got. I've got a unit of Bretonnian peasants up on that hill there, and then behind them I have my Enchantress. Wasn't super useful this game. She did a little bit, but I'm gonna have to start figuring out what spells I really want her to take because she did not do a lot. He's got a unit of a cannon up there, and then a bolt thrower with an engineer between the two up in the very center. And then further over in the back there, we've got another cannon with an engineer. So he's got his cannons all over the place. His other units you can see there are a unit of warriors, and those are led by their standard bearer. And then right next to them, we've got a unit of Longbeards led by a king being carried by shield bearers, and then Thunderers right next to that. He also has a unit of miners, and those miners are off the board. He had a roll, and I think they showed up in like turn 3 or so we'll see those in a little bit. Then for me, right in the center with those white cloaks, you can see I've got my questing knights. I've got a skirmishing unit of archers, and then I've got a unit of men-at-arms. And to the far, far side there on the right, you can see my unit of Bretonnia knights. They're a pretty standard unit. They don't have anything fancy on them other than they've got a paragon leading them. And then at the very bottom, you can see there is my trebuchet. We were really excited to see how these siege weapons worked, and they all worked not necessarily super effectively, but super fun. So you can see right from the start, his cannon ended up shooting right through my men-at-arms, so I'm missing a few men-at-arms down there right near the building. And then my knights to the far right they took a shot from the Thunderers and ended up losing one of their guys. So here you can see his Rangers hidden in the forest with my knights heading right towards him, and I've got the unit standard bearer right at the front there. It's a super fun unit to watch moving across the battlefield. And then we've got the Slayers off there preparing to meet with my questing knights. They also have a Demon Slayer with them as well. So they were a really, really tough, deadly unit. Here you can see up close my Bretonnian knights and my men-at-arms. Off there you can see with the Grail knights, we just went ahead and treated those fields as regular terrain. That was more just decorative. I know there's different ways you can play with them, but we decided we didn't want the battlefield to be too busy with actual terrain, but we still wanted it to look cool, so we put that down. So here you can see they took their first casualty there from the Thunderers off in the distance. And then his cannon ended up firing. Cannons are actually really, really deadly. They end up ripping right through your units. They usually only take out one guy in each row. But that's enough, especially when you've got small units, like a unit of only 6 there. It ended up punching right through and really, really badly messing up my knights there. I think we ended up losing about 3 knights and 3 more knights there, and we ended up with 1 sole knight left running around. So that was no fun. Then, of course, that bolt thrower off in the distance ended up sinking right through my Grail Knights, and took one of them out as well. And Grail Knights, as tough as they are and as cool as they are, they still only have one wound. So you really want to make sure you're using that, getting that ward off to protect you from ranged until you can actually get into close combat, which is very flavorful. And then my lance ended up getting blunted. So I had my Grail Knights here in an actual lance, but then we had to end up learning all the rules for blunting a lance and everything. They ended up flattening out right up against the dwarves, and they ended up in a pretty solid, consistent clash, back and forth for a little while. So that was a lot of fun. Here you can see a better shot of my peasant bowmen. Off in the distance, you can see those dwarf warriors moving in. And then going up against these dwarf warriors here, I ended up charging with both the Grail Knights and my Pegasus Knights and Hippogriff. The Pegasus Knights and the Hippogriff hitting from this side was pretty devastating. We ended up tearing through those dwarves pretty quickly. They are really, really effective, and even with that standard bearer is armed with the rune of hesitation, which means that my Grail Knights charging into their front lost the ability to use their lances and had to switch to close combat weapons, which was devastating. Now that only works for the front row, guys attacking from the front, so getting hit from the side ended up messing him up pretty bad. And then here you can see my knights engaging with those rangers. I wasn't sure how effective those rangers were going to be, but I didn't want to mess with it, and so I figured once I was done dealing with them, then I could wheel myself around and come around the back side of the dwarf, since they had bunched themselves up only onto one side. And here you can see what the conflict looks like from overhead. So I ended up with all but one of my knights on the far right ended up getting killed off. So I ran that other knight back around towards the back, because I wasn't sure where those miners were going to come up, and I basically wanted to use him to stop him, if only for one round, because he was essentially useless at that point. You can see I've lost a couple more Grail Knights, and then we've removed some of the dwarves, and we've pushed the dwarf warriors back further. On top of that, my trebuchet ended up taking out a few long beards, so you can see there's some missing. But all those war machines are still in really great shape, so I'm going to need to start figuring out a way to get those guys back in line, to be able to, in the back of the line, to be able to start hitting siege weapons, because currently I don't have anything other than like the Pegasus Knights that can do that, as far as I know. At this point, the other table next to us ended up getting occupied by by a game of 40k, so we had to bring all of our stuff over. Luckily, there was enough empty spots on the table, and so from now on, you're going to see our table get a little bit more cluttered as we go along. So here you can see up close that one soul knight who ended up surviving. He's racing off towards the prophetess, and again, she was not super useful. I think I just wasn't getting her up close enough to be able to use some more of her abilities. I think she had the rusting curse that she could cast, but I wasn't close enough to anybody to actually use it. So that was a big problem on my part. And then also these skirmishing archers also didn't do much. So I'm going to be working more on figuring out what exactly I want to do with my units and how I want them to maneuver, so they're actually going to be a lot more useful, because I feel like I spent a lot of time with some stuff in the back sort of wandering around, not sure what to do. So here you can see the gyro bomber ended up taking out a few of my archers. So they ended up firing back on it, and I think it's right about this point that they ended up taking it out. My questing knights ended up decimated down to only a single questing knight off to the far left there. And now I've got a bunch of dwarf slayers right in my rear for my Bretonnian knights who were in the forest. They ended up finishing off the rangers, and I was going to just try to race them on through to get him out the other side of the forest to start moving towards the siege weapons. My men-at-arms were getting ready to move in to engage with the Longbeards. I wasn't expecting them to survive against the Longbeards because, like I said, they do have a king being carried by shield bearers, so definitely not something easy, but I do still have all of my Pegasus Knights and my Lord on Hippogriff, so I was pretty sure I was going to be ready for taking them on. Yeah, this is the point at which my archers ended up all turning and taking down that gyrocopter. It was not super easy to take down, especially because the archers are frankly not great. They're nice at taking out a few guys here and there, but I got him up on that hill, which was great. But the problem is then that building was basically blocking them from being able to see anything, so I was going to have to start moving them up, despite them originally having the spikes. I couldn't get myself deployed onto the hill at the very beginning, so I couldn't have those spikes out. But frankly, those spikes are only there as a temporary measure anyway, so if I can't use them, I can't use them. It's not really a problem. So then the dwarf miners ended up showing up. That pony with the cart, at the time we were playing, and at the time that I'm recording this, the Arcane Journal hasn't come out, so there was no official rules for it, so it was acting as a unit filler. So it was basically taking the spot of six dwarves, essentially. So if 6 of them ended up dying, we could remove that. So to keep them back, I ended up running my knight in. He ended up dying pretty quickly. He was basically just there, sent in to die. So here you can see my lone Grail Knight is up against the dwarf warriors there, and then my men-at-arms ended up finally coming into contact with the Longbeards, and I ended up bringing my Pegasus Knights around to hit the Longbeards in the back. I ended up tearing through those Longbeards really, really badly, so if we had continued on another turn, I'm pretty sure we would have finished them off. But then I'm dealing with, let's see, a unit of about half a unit of Slayers, including a Demon Slayer. I've got to deal with some more Dwarf Warriors. I've got 3 Siege Weapons, the Thunderers, and the Miners. So prospects were not looking super great for me. But at that point, the game room was getting really, really noisy. It had been quite a few hours, and so we decided to wrap it up. So when we finally added up the points, it ended up coming up really, really close, which I'll discuss here in the conclusion. So it was an amazing game. I really, really love the old world. I think I love it a lot more than 40k, and I own 6 armies now for 40k. So I think I'm going to start getting more armies for Warhammer the Old World. I've already started working on an Empire army and a Lizardman army, and I'd like to do something evil at some point. I may do like Beastmen, Bay Herds, something like that. So it was a lot of fun. Me and my buddy had a great time. He had insisted he was not going to be getting into the game at all because if he wants to do rank and flank, he's going to do much smaller scale. But this game, I think, ended up convincing him, and he is actually in the middle of printing up a dwarf army right now. So it was a very, very close score. It was 450 for him versus my 445, which counts as a draw. Again, I'm not sure how I would have done on the next turn because I think I would have lost a lot more. I'm not sure that I necessarily could have gotten rid of those siege weapons, though getting myself into close combat prevents me from worrying about them anymore. I mean, technically he can still shoot, but he risks taking out his own guys. So it was a really, really close game. But game stores are so loud, especially this game store. They don't have much in the way of insulation, and so the minute you get more than like 5 people in there, I have a really hard time. I've already previously talked in a previous video about auditory processing issues. So near the end of the game, we were kind of worn out by how loud it was, which prompted me after this game to turn around and go buy a game mat. So I bought a big, giant 4-foot by 6-foot game mat, and I've got some pink plastic or pink foam boards that are 2 feet by 2 feet, so I can lay those out on my dining room table and get a 4 foot by 6 foot board. And then I've got plenty of terrain to be able to run my own games. So I think unless I could find somewhere I can play that's a lot quieter, we're going to be playing a lot more games at my place. There's a whole campaign mode. Me and my friend are super interested in campaign stuff, so we're looking at possibly starting a old world campaign. And yeah, I had a lot of fun. I am not in any way like feeling like I wasted my time painting up all these minis, because I painted up all these minis long before I started playing. So I was worried that I was going to sit down and start playing and just be really bummed out by it. But I actually had so much fun. I keep having so much fun. The old world is a lot of fun to play. I'm interested in trying out, seeing how tournaments work, because so far my 2 games have been like 3 to 4 hours, and that's just not an option when you're playing in a tournament. So I'm interested to see what happens when we have to start speeding things up quite a bit. And I'm looking forward to studying more tactics and things like that, and learning how to play more. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you to everybody who has been asking for more battle reports. As soon as I get another game in of the old world, I'll definitely do another battle report. I ended up playing in a game last week that was a giant Battletech Alpha Strike game. I may end up talking about it a bit more, but I'm not going to do a battle report on it because I just snapped a couple of photos here and there. But that was a lot of fun. We ended up having 6 players, 500 points each on a massive board. So I'm not sure what my next battle report will be. I'll let you know. But thanks for tuning in, and I will see you next time.